SNL, I'm about to be in Indy. Cody is in Indy. He met with some defensive prospects. He's going to have content about that throughout the day. Tomorrow, it's offensive time. I'm an offensive guy, and I'm going to be on the scene, and we got you covered here on SNL. Tight ends, running backs, wide receivers. We got you.
I like tight ends.
Yes, he does.
We both do. There's some fun tight ends at the combine, so can't wait to stare at the tight ends tomorrow.
Yeah, you love fun. You love tight ends, and you love staring at tight ends. So yes, you do.
I sure do.
Yeah,
I sure do.
Yeah, let's dump that. Anyway, so Nick Caserio spoke today. D'Amico Ryan spoke yesterday. I kind of want to talk about the mix of those two before we hear what Nick had to say. They always love up on each other when they speak of one another. They talk about how fun it is to work together and all that type of stuff, collaboration. I think Caserio said, sometimes I just sit there and think while he talks, and he sits there and thinks while I talk. And it was just like, okay, all right, that's great.
They're one mind, Landry. They're two bodies, one mind, the Houston Texans mind.
Yeah, I like this mix. I think it's a good mix. There were a few things that Caserio said that kind of made me raise my eyebrows a little bit, and maybe this is the podium critic in me, but he said that, and I talked about this in a video that's going to drop tonight. Fighting through the Caserio salad is what I call it. He said D'Amico Ryans is old school, and my question is, what does that mean? Like when describing a football coach, what does that mean? And is old school good? Like, it seems like old school now is something that you say about somebody who's rocking pants that probably should have been worn in the 90s or something like that. Like, I don't know. Old school is usually something you say to justify someone for being stubborn. Yeah, he's just old school. You got what does he mean when he says D'Amico Ryans is old school? And he said D'Amico's old school in a couple of ways.
I feel like the two biggest things that are old school about D'Amico Ryans is he wants the offense to be rush first, rush centric, be able to run the football whenever they need to or want to. And their defense is predicated and situated around getting after the quarterback. And I would tell you, the two teams that played in the Super Bowl played a lot of old school football throughout the course of the year. Be gritty, win defensively, score enough points, don't make mistakes, and then take extreme advantage of the mistakes that your opponents make. I feel like the Eagles, this Eagles Super Bowl, I feel like resonates with these two guys so much, and really resonates with D'Amico Ryans in that they just got to unleash 4 defensive linemen for 60 minutes, and it worked. And that's like D'Amico Ryans' perfect day at the office. So I think that's the most old school thing about D'Amico Ryans is we're going to just affect the quarterback, and we're going to run the football when we have to run the football.
Yeah.
Because the way he talks about wide receivers are almost like, yeah, you need them to go and make some plays when you need, a couple of big explosive plays. Like, he'd be comfortable going down the field 4 yards at a time.
My question would just be like, is that going to hold you back? Is that mindset healthy? And I think we'll get a big grasp of it. There is something I want to talk about though, because I think the actions of these two guys, and it's really the thing that disappoints me the most about the Caserio and D'Amico Ryans there. And maybe it's unfair of me because it is early, but if this continues, then I think we could be looking at philosophy not matching action. And we'll get to that in a sec, but you just mentioned the Philadelphia Eagles and the way to copy the Eagles. And there's a lot. I mean, what can you not copy about the job that they've done as an organization? Just going back, even like you can go from Andy Reid to Peterson, the way that they've had opportunities to win multiple Super Bowls in multiple eras with multiple styles is insanely awesome. But I like this from Nick Caserio because it's basically what I've been saying about the best way to copy the Eagles. So take it away, Nick Caserio. What are we thinking about when it comes to copying the Eagles? And what is the example that he used? Not 1, not 2, 3, 4 times. Who knows? Here's Nick Caserio talking about finding players, diamonds in the rough.
Same. Try to find good football players. Look, there's always a cost associated with the players. So you evaluate the market. What's the cost associated with a player? Can you fit that player within the parameters that you have? If you can, great. Okay. Then if not, let's go to the next player. I'm sure, like, I'd use Bond as a really good example, right? He signed 1 year, $3.5 million contract and was an all-pro linebacker. So, I mean, that's a credit to Howie and their staff, and now he's going to capitalize in free agency. So maybe there's an opportunity like that. So just because you pay X player X number of dollars doesn't necessarily mean, well, okay, it's going to result in whatever production.
And I think that's a really good example.
The Eagles have
Mekhi
the
Becton
Eagles
too.
The Eagles actually have 3 really great examples. Mekhi Becton, which you mentioned, Bond, which he mentioned, and then they paid a tremendous amount of money for Bryce Huff to be one of their star pass rushers, and it never clicked. And they didn't use him, and they used the guys that they had, and they made do without him affecting the game as a highly paid pass rusher. So that is like the Caserio sliding that in at the end. Just because you pay a guy a lot of money doesn't mean you're actually getting a lot of production out of him. That, I feel like, is that's almost like a tentpole thing to Nick Caserio's. Just because he costs a lot of money doesn't mean he's going to be good for us.
I think if you look at pretty much every year in the Super Bowl, there's an example of that, like on different scales. Like this one's the dream scenario where the guy's one of the best backers in the league. You get him at a bargain, and then he probably leaves. But if you're able to do what the Eagles have done, and it's not just one example, then that's going to be something that you hopefully do every year. Like the Kansas City Chiefs. I'll use the Kansas City Chiefs as an example. Like Kadarius Toney was a loser everywhere he played. Like he's a disaster. And in the Super Bowl, I mean, he's scoring a touchdown. He's having a key punt return. And I mean, that's it. There's examples like that throughout with like that the good organizations find a way to do. So I think that Caserio is onto something. I know he mentioned the Blake Cashman example. I think it's actually a fair example.
Who's the closest current example to that for the Texans?
Tim Settle, maybe, but he kind of wore down. I would say maybe Settle, 2 years, $6 million, as opposed to Eric Armstead and whatever the hell that would have costed. I would say that's a really good example.
It looked like it was going to be Foley, Fatukasi, and Mario Edwards, and then Fatukasi was a mash unit the whole year, and Mario Edwards had the best game of his life and then got suspended.
And I think you could stick to the knucklehead Chiefs angle. I think Steven Nelson was a good example. I think what they did with Steven Nelson,
they got every last bit out of that, man. And they needed him when they had him.
A little bit different because it wasn't like the biggest payday that he had, but I thought they did a good job with Steven Nelson. I think they did a good job with Tim Settle, maybe Singletary. Like Singletary came in and he kind of bailed you out, back on the team. Run game, got paid, like left and got paid, like Caserio said.
Unfortunately, they did not Zach Bond Dalton Schultz. They did not let him come in cheap, successful, and then let him walk. They decided to give him the bag.
It is SNL, Cody Stoots live in Indy. I'm heading to my plane very shortly. God, it's awkward when you have that plane flight at 6:30 instead of like 4:30 or 2:30 because you kind of got to factor in the 5 o'clock traffic when you're going to the plane. So it's like you got to leave a little bit early. Like it's a different vibe. It's a different feel.
There's nothing you can control. It could be some idiot ran out of gas and there's a giant backup. There could be one of those random Houston freeway things where there's no explanation for why everybody was moving slow at a section of the freeway. Let me
actually you. There could be more of a backup. The backup's guaranteed. It can be a worse backup. The backup is guaranteed. Sometimes you can catch them slipping if the flight's at noon or something like that and you leave at 10. You can catch them slipping. There's going to be a backup around 5. We know this.
You're correct.
Speaking of backups, and I'm going back to what I was talking about with Caserio and the D'Amico Ryans philosophy. Backup running backs, running back depth. This is the most frustrating thing, and it's early, so it's not like huge frustration. It's just kind of a frustration watch. I don't get why these guys are not churning running backs more. And I'm not talking about drafting a guy in the end of the 6th round. I don't understand why there aren't multiple running backs on this team that can make plays. And you can go ahead and drink. It's the biggest drinking game this time of the year. I'm going to want a running back. I'm going to want running backs. It doesn't matter. It's a tradition like no other. But here's my problem, Cody. San Francisco was known for this. Like San Francisco was known for this. Like even if they had a good run game, they still traded for Christian McCaffrey. Even if they had a good run game, they still drafted Elijah Mitchell. They got Mason. They got all these running backs. Deebo Samuel, they played him at running back at one point. Like they're always adding running backs. They're always looking for multiple guys. They drafted Trey Sermon. It didn't work out when they had this too. In the same Elijah Mitchell draft, they drafted 2 backs in that draft.
You remember when they drafted? It was like a BYU kid, like Shanahan, like fell in love with him, and
they love running backs.
Was it D'Amico's story about
Elijah?
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, the story where it's like he really wanted this linebacker.
And you know what's crazy about that?
Yeah.
He also said that he wanted a linebacker at the time, but Kyle Shanahan basically overrode him. So is there anyone to override D'Amico if he's in love with a linebacker and there's like that type of opportunity? But I say all that to say this. If you're going to be an old school coach, you got to have multiple running backs to be able to tote the rock, man. Like
you can't just run Joe Mixon 500 times.
You can't go from Dameon Pierce being unplayable to Dameon Pierce being the guy that you're going to act like you rely on and believe in. You can't have Dare Gumbawale as the back that you trust the most. And Caserio is the ultimate example. Like the New England Patriots drafted Sony Michel in the first round. There was a game, I always point to the Kansas City game, where James White was making plays out of the backfield. Sony Michel, I think, ran for 100 yards. Rex Burkhead scored a touchdown. Like they had that little effer, Danny Woodhead with Ben Jarvis, Green Ellis. Like the law firm. Yeah. They always had multiple running backs making plays. And that's the thing that I think is most interesting about Caserio and D'Amico is like all these things, all these routes. That's the one thing. And maybe it's a limitation of assets. But it's the most frustrating thing in this running back situation. And we're going to talk to the running backs Friday, I believe. The running back situation is such to where there's so much opportunity, but there's also going to be like a run where you can be out of luck. But if D'Amico really wants to be old school, get you some backs, man. Get you some backs.
What I'm really picking up on here is we talk with the head coach of the team, we talk with the general manager of the team. They talk about a laundry list of things, and there's no mention of a running back. And Landry's like, they didn't think about me at some point. Just at least throw in a conversation about a running back.
Like Jawar Jordan didn't do it for me. I wanted to get in the run. Like, and that was it's just kind of a throwaway. It's a little bit frustrating.
This will be the year where it's like, pull your hair out if they don't do it, because there's so many good running backs. We're going to talk to damn near every one of them on Friday, but there's so many good running backs, and it is Baskin Robbins, baby. It is whatever flavor of running back you want. You want to do it all, potential star, they got him. You want a pass catcher, they got him. You want just a gritty grinder, special teams ace that you can stick as a third running back and a special teams guy, they got him. Like they got all of them in so many different, so much depth at each of the specific types of running back too. Like this is the year. And I wonder if maybe there's hey, let's operate in silence. Real G's move in silence.
Yeah, maybe so. I didn't expect you to say real G's today. Look at that.
Lasagna. I know the reference, Lil Wayne.
Okay, there you go. All right. So a lot of people, when they talk about the salary cap, they go Soulja Boy. We'll keep the rap references going here. They go Soulja Boy.
This is fake. That's fake.
It's a fake.
Yeah, that's Photoshop. That's fake. On my mama, that's fake. On my heart, on my life, my little brother grave, I could die right now. That's fake.
Now, does Nick Caserio think the salary cap is fake? The answer is obviously not, but he kind of does. Let's hear Nick Caserio talking about that salary cap and all this concern about the lack of bread that the Texans have heading into the offseason.
Flexibility here. So by the time we get started, I think we're able to kind of create a little bit, go back to last year. So I think we'll be able to kind of put ourselves in a position to add some players, to the team here as we go here in the next few weeks.
Okay. Stop clutching your pearls about the salary cap. I know there are so many people worried, people in the mentions on social media, the comment section of the videos. They only got $7 million. They've only got $4 million. They only got this much money. Oh, thank God there was an extra little bit in the salary cap because the Texans didn't have any room. And then Caserio was like, yeah, well, we're going to make some. Like, we're going to make – he doesn't – so these salary cap conversions, he didn't have to talk to the player if he don't want to. He can just turn their money into salary cap space. Like this – there are provisions in the contracts that he builds in that he can just do it whenever and create salary cap space. Like now he's not doing what the Eagles are doing. he went on a 2-minute soliloquy about how I don't do it like Howie Roseman does it, but they're not going to do it like the Eagles where they're kicking money 10 years down the road. He even brought in the U.S. government's got $1 trillion, $30 trillion debt.
He said 40 trillion, and obviously you got to pay it eventually. Yeah, I didn't know
I didn't
know where that was going.
I don't know when the $40 trillion Eagles debt gets paid, but I'll tell you what, I'll pay it 10 years from now if it'll put a Lombardi over at NRG Stadium.
Well, if you also establish an ability to find these guys like we previously mentioned here on SNL, Landry Locker, Cody Stoots with you, then it kind of equals out a little bit.
I actually had right after that comment from Caserio and he was doing this press conference, I was standing next to Brooks Cabina, who used to cover the Texans for the Houston Chronicle, now covers the Eagles. And I was like, well, what'd you think about that? Because you've covered both of them, covered Caserio for a few years. You watched him play, with the rebuild and then have to actually kind of execute some salary cap gymnastics. And then, Howie Roseman seems like the best of all time at like kicking the money down the road and making it happen. And he's like, well, Howie Roseman doesn't operate in 2-year windows like Nick Caserio does. He actually goes and Camino's like, he operates in a much longer runway. And so he's comfortable making bigger investments that have larger sums that are required down the road. Whereas Nick Caserio, having had to deal with a rebuild and needing to keep capital fresh, probably has a totally different approach, totally different outlook. He's like, maybe down the road it changes. You've also got to have enough players to do what Howie does. And then we went through how the offensive line in Philadelphia is great, and they've basically paid all those guys, and how the Texans' offensive line, not great. And then we had a very spirited discussion about how good Titus Howard is, and I had to let Brooks Cabina know. He's like, yeah, Titus is great at right tackle. And I was like, that's weird to say, not true.
Wait, he said that?
But great maybe wasn't the word, but he was like, yeah, they should just leave him at their right tackle. He'll be fine. And I was like, that's not – he's like, the contract was okay. And I was like,
he's been out of town a little while.
I was like, the contract was not okay. And he was like, how bad was it? I was like, he was the 4th highest paid tackle or right tackle right away. And he's like, well, now he's a guard. And I was like, he's the 2nd highest paid guard now. He's like, that's not good. But yes, so I think to kind of sum this up, bring this back to what Nick Caserio said, if he feels like they got to have cap space to spend money, like they're going to try to hit on a Zach Bond-esque player. They're going to try to find a bargain player that DeMeco Ryans could turn into a really, really good player, and that player may or may not be here after one season. They're going to try to do that. But we saw it last year. If they feel like they need a Danielle Hunter, they'll go out there, make the money, invest the investment.
Well, last year they had the money, though. I don't know if that's the same. I don't know if, they had the money last year.
But I'm saying I believe if they feel like they need one of these big expensive players, they'll go get them and they'll find the money for it.
Yeah, and I think that's possible. What did you make of him saying that the players like Cole Popovich? Like, I don't care. Like, cool. Like, I guess that's good.
I'm thrilled that the second coming of Dante Scarnecchia is the new offensive line coach for the Houston Texans. Like, that's how they talk about Cole Popovich. It's wild.
You're exaggerating.
It's wild.
You're exaggerating.
Like, Cole Popovich is well respected across the league, is what Nick Caserio said. He passed up a promotion last year. To stick with the Houston Texans. So he was the assistant offensive line coach. So the promotion would have been O-line coach somewhere else. Okay. So he passed up a promotion to stay with the Texans.
Maybe he passed up going back to New England. Maybe he passed up going back to New England just like Kaylee did.
Offensive coordinators, without the Texans bringing up Cole Popovich, brought up that they wanted to keep Cole Popovich on the staff. Like,
well, maybe
he is Dante Scarnecchia, and then everything's fixed, and he's the greatest offensive line coach of all time, and the Texans are going to build the Great Wall of Houston, and Cole Popovich, because he's the guy that they have to listen to now, because apparently it was chaos in the offensive line room last year. The one voice thing that they've said, like, what was happening? Did it look like detention at high school? Where like Titus has got his feet up on the desk, Laramie's got his headphones on in the corner, Juice Scruggs is shooting spitballs into Jared Patterson's hair. Like, what was going on in the offensive line room? And Chris Strausser's like, you guys have to be quiet. And they're like, screw you, Mr. Strausser. Like,
maybe when he says that Popovich turned down a promotion, maybe like the reports that Nick Caley turned down New England, maybe Popovich was going to go with them, and they talked their way out of, hey, we don't need to go to New England. So maybe it was like a team duo. Maybe that was the O-line coach gig that he would have got. He was going to be Nick Caley's in New England, and they both talked it out. So it was like a team turn down promotion type of vibe.
Would you like me to describe one of the most awkward scenes I've seen at Radio Row so far?
I would love it.
So a Dallas radio station is here, and they're trying to claim their table, and a Houston TV reporter is at said table, and the Dallas guy who's trying to put the skirt on the table is trying to be very nice about, hey, this is our table, I'm trying to set up the equipment. And there's sort of an obliviousness as the table skirt gets closer and closer and closer to the reporter's laptop.
Turn the camera, bro.
There we go.
Oh my God. So the fans there. So I'm assuming Broadus is going to be there, which will be great. I haven't seen him in a long time. And Aaron, look at Aaron. Aaron, dude, that's not your table, brother.
Well, to be fair, they were not here the first couple of days. So
yeah, but they're here. It's like if someone leaves at a bar at their table and you sit in their table, as soon as they show up, you're gone.
There was some squatters' rights a little bit.
Like if there's an 8-person table and 2 people are sitting at the end, and you join their table at the end, but then all of a sudden their full party shows up, you get the hell out of there. Like,
yeah, I just
stand at the bar.
I just don't know why there wasn't a like, hey, we're gonna like just say like either an offer to just pick the laptop up real quick, or just maybe like hey, can you just get off of our table? It was humorous. It was humorous.
I'm gonna give him a hard time about that tomorrow. I want to see Aaron work a scene like in this type of scene. I bet it's an interesting vibe. I'm ready to check this out.
There was rumors of a 2 a.m. like revival last night, where like everybody kind of like packed it in at like 1:30, and then like at 2 a.m. like Indianapolis whipped back into a frenzy as like NFL people got done with their evening assignments and went out and partied against it's like for like a week, it's like a city that doesn't sleep.
Yeah. Okay.
Caserio looked like he was pretty well rested though.
Yeah, he was in bed. Is there going to be an overhaul? A lot of people want a lot of changes. Nick Caserio, GM of your Houston Texans. Here's what he had to say about a potential overhaul, a roster overhaul, I shall say.
Short-term element, the long-term element. Maybe you have a position or a player, you draft them. Specifically the draft, you draft them. Maybe it's not for this year, maybe it's for next year, or the player's going to have a legit opportunity. I think however they come in the building, the competition is going to sort itself out. So we're not married to necessarily anybody, so nobody's guaranteed anything other than an opportunity. So contracts change, players come and go. So once we have kind of the players in the building, where are we? What are our options? If we move on from said player, what's a replacement? At what cost? It's very fluid. I think that's the best way to look at it. It's very fluid.
Yeah, and I mean that's obviously Titus Howard, Jack Mason. That's immediately where you go.
Hey, if we're not married to anybody, then there's about 5-6 guys that ought to be like, ooh, am I going to have to put my house up? Am I going to have to find a realtor in another city? Ooh, Shaq Mason, Tyus Howard. My early, like, let me get out in front of training camp. My early surprise training camp cut is Jimmy Ward.
I mean, the extension never made sense.
Yeah.
So, you had Jalen Petrie thriving in the role that Jimmy is destined to play.
That Jimmy doesn't want to play, by the way.
Yeah, and I heard D'Amico yesterday. I'm glad you brought this up because it didn't quite make like the A topic for me. But I heard D'Amico say yesterday, and this was like, okay, well, there's a helpless feeling. Like it's actually it actually describes the most helpless reality of any player. Like even when they talk about the offensive linemen, like they stink, there's a chance they might be gone. There's still like some hope at least put out there, like that they had some good plays, they blah blah blah, communication, yada yada yada. Like he straight up said yesterday about Jimmy Ward, he said, yeah, he's just got to stay healthy. Okay. Like,
yeah.
Well,
and Cody's going to stay on his diet.
Yeah. I mean, because he takes care of himself. It just doesn't like and he's getting older and it's been kind of a thing, but he said, yeah, Jimmy's just got to stay healthy. All righty. Well, that was kind of the case before y'all gave him the extension. And quite frankly, I'm not betting that. So, okay. Like you can't turn the injuries off.
No, you can't.
That was wild. And just like D'Amico, Nick Caserio, he seems to like what's going on in the trenches. We talked about Daniel Jeremiah saying he sees twice as many starters at D-line this year compared to last year. D'Amico Ryans was asked, where do you want to focus the most on, or what are you most excited about? He said defensive line, offensive line. Here's Nick Caserio talking about them trenches.
Both fronts. I mean, there's some good players. There's some good depth. It's top to bottom. So I think our philosophy is just find good football players with the right traits and characteristics that are really good people, that are competitive, that put the team first, that are mentally and physically tough, and are consistent.
Yeah, that was the first part was interesting. The second part was the pull string. This new Nick Caserio toy has 18 4-minute phrases that you've heard before.
And by the way,
smart, dependable.
It wasn't too bad today. I thought Caserio was fine. Interesting. Again, 6:00, I'll drop a video. Night stream tonight, TBD, depending on flights. I'm always at the mercy of flights, but we'll figure something out.
I will say there's actually offensive line depth in this draft has sort of started to show up in the draft conversation a lot in the past week or so. But like even here, like as you kind of talk to some people, like, oh yeah, there's actually like a lot of really good offensive linemen that maybe year one you're not super pumped about playing them, but like they're going to turn into really nice players. And I'm like, well, that screams, day 3 Houston Texan type of player. Draft a guy fourth, fifth round. You let him sit for a year, or by midseason, in season, whoever he's pushing, he beats that guy out. Like, that'd be nice. Like, obviously, there's other things I want him to focus on and go and get, but to find out that there's a lot more depth at that offensive line position than people thought, it's a nice comfort.
Things don't like always align, in life and in the draft and stuff. This just feels like it's unfortunate. It's nothing. I don't know that it's anything they could have done, and it's quite frankly not anything that they could not do when the draft comes around. But this draft just kind of feels like we've seen drafts in the last 4 years where they have an array of picks. They have a crap ton of picks. This kind of feels like a draft where it would be nice to have a crap ton of picks. Like it just kind of feels like that. It almost, I don't want to say they're bringing a knife to a gunfight. It does feel a little bit slim for them heading into the draft, especially compared to the opportunities and stuff they can do.
It's funny because they had the extra first round picks for so many years, and obviously they did what they did in 2023 to lose one of those, and they used the pick when they made the Vikings trade to go and get Stefon Diggs, and so they drafted 9 players in 2024. They drafted 9 players in 2023, drafted 9 players in 2022. They got 6 picks right now. And there's not really a mechanism, unless they do exactly what they did last year, which is drop out of the first round. There's not really a mechanism to go be adding a bunch of other picks. There's not a player they're trading that's going to go get them a pick that you're like excited for them to use. Yeah. So, so they've drafted 27 players in 3 years, and they might just draft, 6 players, 3 below their 3-year average this year. Like, that's not as fun, even though, we never saw anything out of Jawar Jordan, Marcus Harris. Ladarius Henderson's still on the roster. We still have no idea how he got hurt last year. Non-football injury for the whole year. No one's ever said anything.
Yeah.
Maybe it doesn't matter to anybody but me, but I still want to know.
Yeah. Oh, go figure that out for me, Cody. Appreciate everyone for coming through.
You're not a Ladarius Henderson truther. You don't believe that he's the solution at guard for this team, Landry?
He was a captain, man. I think I mentioned that a few times.
Oh, I have started to put little C's next to guys' names when they mention that they were a captain, or I find out that they're a captain, because that just adds to their likelihood of being a Houston Texan.
Jeez. Subscribe, like, ride along. We'll be live at Indy tomorrow. Always remember, when it comes to this Texan stuff, we're all in it together.
Eat good, sleep good, be good. We'll talk Texans again soon. Thanks for watching, everybody.